Welcome to Unity Now, the podcast where we discuss all things Unity 2020. My name is Toby Davis, and I will be your host today as we let Zach Rhoads enjoy some much-deserved time off. As Zach mentions every week, I will not assume that just by tuning in, you know what Unity 2020 is all about. Unity 2020 is an idea that started when Brett Weinstein announced the plan on the Joe Rogan Experience in mid-June. From there, the movement was born, and since then, tens of thousands of volunteers have signed up, organized, and have begun to create a groundswell. From an original ballot vote that selected 6 nominees, the Unity 2020 movement has drafted Tulsi Gabbard and Dan Crenshaw to be our candidates. I'm joined today by fellow Unity 2020 volunteers, Mikey Fernandez and Akilan Narayanaswamy. Oh, I said that wrong again, didn't I?
It's Akilan Narayanaswamy.
Narayanaswamy. Yeah. My apologies.
Zach
good. Talks about that. Zach is a teacher, and he talks about that being kind of a nightmare when he's trying to go through kids' names to pronounce them. So, thank you both for joining me. I will start by just asking you to give me, both of you, just kind of quick background of kind of who you are, where you come from. And Akilan, if you don't mind, we'll start with you.
All right. My name's Akilan. I'm from Marietta, Georgia, a suburb right outside of Atlanta. And I'm a college student at Purdue University. I study in computer engineering, and I'll be working as a software developer for GE Appliances after I graduate. A little bit about me and my political side. I started off as a liberal in high school, slowly found my way to the Libertarian side, and I've always been interested in politics. It's something that's intrigued me ever since high school. And Unity, the idea of Unity is something that's been floating around in my mind for a while now. And so when I found Brett and he announced that, and there was an opportunity to volunteer, I jumped at it.
Okay, very good. And so, same question to you, Mikey. Where you're from? Who are you? Give us a little background.
Yeah, my name's Mikey. I'm from Suffern, New York, which is a suburb of New York City, but now I'm a graduate student at MIT up in Cambridge doing mechanical engineering. I've also been interested in politics for a little bit. I would describe myself as a classical libertarian bent, big focus on Enlightenment values like science and universalism and reason. Big fan of Brett and the IDW in general. Been listening to those guys for a few years now. So when Brett announced the plan on Joe Rogan, I signed up sometime in June or early July and been excited to contribute however I can, including this now.
Very good. So, I appreciate both of you joining me today. And so what we wanted to talk about is, and I'll start with this. When Brett announced the ballot access plan on the Articles of Unity YouTube page last week, he said we would in our speaking to Libertarian and Green parties, both of those parties, in hopes that they would help the Unity 2020 candidates get on the ballot in all 50 states. So we thought we would start with each of you and see if you can possibly take the position of somebody from the Libertarian Party or somebody that has those kind of ideas and steelman their position as to why they would not want to join the Unity 2020 movement. And so I will flip of a coin. Either one of you can go. Mikey, would you like to start?
Sure. I think the first thing that would jump out to me as a reason that the Libertarian Party, as opposed to libertarians as individuals, wouldn't be interested in Unity is that the party has worked hard over a number of years to get that 50-state ballot access, which as we know is very hard to do. And they would not be very interested in giving that up for someone else's candidates to run on their ticket. It would subvert their primary process where they picked Joe Jorgensen, who was also the only, depending on the outcome of our draft and coin flip and everything, the only female running at the top of a ticket in this election cycle. So it'd be pretty hard for the Libertarian Party to give up their ballot access to an as yet unproven Unity 2020 movement.
Okay, fair enough. So, Akilan, if you don't mind, could you think about maybe how you would respond to those arguments if you guys were speaking, about this specifically?
Yeah, I think it's a fair point, but what we would have to do with Unity is make a strong case for why we have to make a strong case for why they would want to give up ballot access. And I think that strong case would have to come with a lot of support, much more support than we currently have. And we also have to be clear that they're going to have a voice in this movement, and their ideals and what they want to implement in government they need to see that they have a chance to implement that in Unity, and that they'll have a voice. Because right now, especially the way with Uni sold, we currently talk about how it's left and right, but I think because the Libertarian Party doesn't find much success. I mean, they don't poll very high in many of the elections, and it's usually very small, like congressional seats or local government where they find success. I think we can show them that they'll have a bigger voice if they hop onto the Unity ticket.
Okay, fair enough. So, Akilan, then back to you again. Do you have any points that you might suggest could be from a steelman position, in addition to what Mikey said of why people that are part of the Libertarian Party or would normally vote that way, why they, should not vote, join the Unity 2020 movement?
I think the biggest thing would be that we've sold this kind of as we're drafting two people from the left and the right, and I see that as the biggest thing that probably keeps them from helping us, because I mean they have qualms with both the left and the right, and if they're seeing a Unity ticket where we're just pulling from the left and right and we're not really considering other political movements, I think they would look at that and be like, hey, why should I join in if you're not really considering libertarian angle on this. They really need to hear that they're going to have a voice in Unity, and we haven't really been selling that quite as hard, and I think that's probably the main reason why they wouldn't want to jump on.
Yeah. Okay, and then Mikey, to you.
I think a good way to talk to someone who feels that way is that the Unity 2020 plan is based inherently on listening to different viewpoints. The left and the right candidates being brought together is to force conversation and dialogue of ideas that don't fit neatly into your camp's bubble. So personally, I have views on like the left and the right. The left views would be police and criminal justice reform. The right views would be looking for free market solutions and deregulation. And rather than trying to rely on one candidate from one party to achieve both of those aims, having a Unity ticket with someone from the left and the right would force them to compromise and hopefully result in policy that represents both my left and right views. Okay. I think also, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think also for the party to be willing to give up the ticket, Brett made some good points in his email about the ballot access plan, that by getting this ton of support on one of these third-party tickets, they could get federal election funding for the next election cycle. So this, giving up their ballot access in this election cycle, could let an independent libertarian candidate really have a chance in future elections, and I'd be extremely happy to support such a candidate.
Okay. Yeah, and so I can tell you guys one of the questions that I would ask Brett myself if I given the chance to speak with him or pose a question is that, obviously it's an important step to restore, the people's power to the White House, specifically the executive branch. But what about the other branches of the federal government? And what about, state and local governments, the governorship, mayors in different cities? what would be our plan to, restore again power to the people in those areas as well. Because obviously at the federal level, it takes a lot of work, between Congress and the executive branch to get really anything moving. And so does that also then kind of fit into what you guys are talking about, to where power to the people could also, be related to giving the Green Party and the Libertarian parties more ballot access and more chances at federal funding and different things? So does that kind of also fit to that narrative as well and help to answer that question, you think?
Yeah, I think that the focus with Unity should be to elevate leaders. I don't think we're specifically not a third party, and we don't want to become one. I think the main point here is that we want to break the conversation from I'm in one party and I'm in one camp politically, and you're in another camp politically, and we're just sort of fighting it out. It should be more of a conversation of who's going to be an effective leader, who's going to take in consideration what the people have to say, and is actually going to provide some real leadership and show a real vision of what they want to see in government. I think what people are tired of are the just throwing stones at each other. If you're on the left, just throwing stones at the people on the right, and people on the right throwing stones at the people on the left. And It just seems like we're so much further away from each other than we really are. And I think we need to break that illusion. And that's really what brings, I think that's what brings the third parties in, is right now the left and right dominate the conversation. And I think Unity needs to basically break their strongholds on the conversation and sort of blow open a pathway for all these extra voices to come in.
I think Akilan makes a really, really good point that the left and the right, the mainstream left and right, dominate the narrative that everyone talks about. But a lot of polling has shown that that's maybe 40% of people. So we have a huge swath of the population that is not being represented. And we really want those people to be represented. That's the goal of our representative democracy is for the people to pick their leaders and to be effective that way.
Yeah, I think Unity should be, I think the key is that Unity should be elevating leaders. We don't want leaders to come in and, sort of talk about, how much they hate the other side, or how much they're going to, give you a bunch of things, or they need to come with a real vision. And I think that's something that only happens if you're having conversations, real conversations with people from all walks of life, from all political perspectives. And I think that's what Unity can step in and provide a platform to do that.
Yeah, I think Jesse Ventura mentioned this on his campfire talk with Brett, how one of the things that kind of escalated his campaign was, I think he was at a college where he answered a question by saying he didn't know about something, but he was willing to listen, right? And so that's maybe what also tends to unite Unity2020 with any other third party that aren't part of the duopoly, is that we're all willing to listen, like you said, to people of other political persuasions or people that tend to lean one way or the other. Like I don't even like to identify myself in any kind of group name at all anymore. If we want to talk about specific things, I'm usually going to lean a little conservative, maybe even a little liberal on some things. But I don't want to say, well, I'm a Republican or I'm a conservative, because you can then make all of those assumptions that come with those group names first, and then I can do the same to you as well, right? So it's important that we remove ourselves from that group think and just be able to have a conversation, like you said.
Yeah, you lose all the nuance if you use those labels, because when you call someone a conservative, they get, like you said, all the things that conservatives are thrown onto them, and you lose the ability to see them as a person with individual opinions on individual issues. And Unity2020 is going to force you to compromise all over the place, so that the left and the right are actually going to talk and look for a solution to each individual thing, and avoid having that prescribed list of 10 commandments, the 10 opinions you have to be a on the left or the right now.
Yeah, I think Chris Rock said it best. Everybody wants to be down with the gang. I'm a liberal. I'm a conservative. I'm a liberal. Just be a person.
Mm.
And I think most people are like, I don't think most people are like, they only identify as I think most people, when they identify as a conservative or liberal, it's because they're afraid of conservatives or they're afraid of liberals. And so they identify with the other side, and they see the other side as bringing something that they really don't want. And so they're like, I need to be on this side so that evil thing doesn't come my way, and trying to keep that at bay. But that's just it's a very negative and conflict oriented way of thinking about government, because those people are your fellow, citizens. Like you shouldn't want to see them in that light. And I think that's why I really like Unity and the whole idea here, the culture here.
You got to share a country with those people.
Yeah.
And if you could, but maybe both of you, give us a little background on what specifically brought you to Unity 2020, and maybe what you guys talk about with friends, family, coworkers, whoever it may be that you're in contact with, maybe when you're trying to convince them to look into this.
How PG do we have to keep these answers?
We check that box that says this is not for kids on YouTube. So
okay. I do not want to vote for a racist, rapist, septuagenarian for president. I think that voting for one of those is a terrible decision for the future of the country, and I think we devolve into extremism. And if you notice, I'm not saying which one is going to be extremism, which one is this super old white person,
right?
Because they're both the same. So I am attracted to Unity so we can have actually a competent leader, and people who are willing to courageously admit they don't know something and turn to their panel of experts, the ones who will actually try and figure out what's best for the country instead of just what's best to get them reelected. And again, I really like Brett, and he's well informed and intelligent about a lot of things. So when he comes out with an idea like this, it's really worth looking into at least, and then staying for the merits it has on its own. Not saying that there has to be a cult of personality around Brett. But.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think until a few years ago, when I started really getting to watching YouTube videos of like intellectuals, I guess, I didn't realize there were so many people that actually thought like independently, and they weren't just parroting these talking points and all of that. Because I mean, my really only exposure to politics until recently was through mainstream media. And that makes it's a lens that just makes everything seem so much worse than it is. And that just scares people into making some, decisions that they wouldn't otherwise if the culture was calmer.
Yeah, I think there was a conversation, and first I will comment and say I find it, I don't know if it's odd or if it's interesting that I think we have these conversations. If you watch the previous episodes of this even, and I don't know if you guys find this when you're talking to other Unity 2020 volunteers, but I think so many people kind of discovered this. Like, obviously they were following Brett Weinstein in some way, shape, or form, or knew of him, but discovered him through the discovery of the, like you mentioned before, the quote unquote intellectual dark web.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, what all kind of unites us that led us down that path? Because like I was telling Mikey before we started recording, I don't know that I can point to any one specific video or person. It's like you watch one maybe episode of the Joe Rogan show, and one of them's on it, and maybe they talk about something else, so you start diving into that, and you end up down some kind of rabbit hole. where people are talking about some very polarizing topics, but they can have a calm, conversation with people they don't agree with necessarily. So that's interesting. But then I'll ask, are the two of you trying to engage friends, family in the conversation about Unity 2020, and how is that going?
Honestly, I don't specifically talk about Unity with people. I kind of just talk about, when politics comes up, we just sort of talk about the state of politics and what people think what people want in their leaders. Just having that conversation without directly bringing it up, and then when you find that they share all these ideas that we're promoting here in Unity, and you say, hey, there's a place where we're having these conversations and we're trying to work to change the conversation, and people are usually really receptive to that. I think a lot of the time people believe that there aren't other people thinking like them, and they're just scared to move because they don't want to, they don't want to be the one black sheep that gets picked off by the wolf. They're waiting to know the safety in numbers, sort of. They want to know that there are other people thinking like them, and or else you just think like, am I just being crazy? I don't want to be that, you don't want to feel like a conspiracy theorist. Most people don't want to feel like that. So when you hear so many people having these conversations, you're like, wow, yeah, no, this is, I'm not just, thinking this up. This isn't just in my head. This is real. And yeah, so, I mean, people have been really receptive to it because I think a lot of people are just already there. They just want something to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you've been having some success, because I can't really say the same. I've taken to Facebook a few times to share information about the plan and try and invite people to nominate and to join in the primary. But I've gotten a number of comments back that this is just going to get Trump reelected. And I come from a left-leaning area, and of course my demographic is pretty left-leaning. So that is the number one fear in a lot of people's minds. And I've had much better success in one-on-one, in-person conversations about it, because when you step away from a computer, someone has to actually look you in the face and understand that you genuinely want the best for the country. You might disagree about how to get there, but you have to understand that other people want good things the same way that you do. And I think that people, when they can fully accept that, would be receptive to this kind of idea. Again, because they don't hold the whole list of left or right views. They might have one or two things that they disagree on, but are afraid to share. And knowing that there's someone else who feels that way and is trying to do something about it can really help someone step out and support Unity.
Yeah, I've heard that this is going to get Trump reelected too. But I think the thing that I like to sell is that, the dissatisfaction in politics comes from both sides, and we're trying to spoil both here. We don't want to, we're not just pulling. I think the big problem with, third party candidates in the past is that they only really pull from one side. They're like a slight deviation from, the left or the right. And so they're really only pulling a lot of support from the left or the right. So I think we want to point out that we're trying to pull from both sides. We're trying to break the stronghold that the parties have over the political conversation, and give the voice back to the people. And that I think that allays some people's fears. I haven't really gone on social media a lot to kind of discuss this. I don't really engage in social media. So my experience has always been one-on-one or small groups having these discussions. But yeah, it's going to take some time, because we've had this style of politics for so long. Conceiving something new that could take its place is it's a tall task in some people's minds, and so you have to sort of slowly chip away at it and bring out what they really feel about politics. Because I think sometimes people get lost in the easy solution of, I just have to vote for this person and my problems will get solved. But the problem is deeper than just the individual politicians. It's an entire culture that is really shifted towards conflict rather than conversation. And I think that's what I think that's been the biggest selling point that has worked for me.
Something
Yeah,
that
it's
just
interesting.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mikey.
Okay, but yeah, something that just came to mind with as a possible reason to not support Unity, but also a reason to support Unity is that our two candidates are trying to be candidates are Tulsi Gabbard and Dan Crenshaw, and we know that they belong to the two main parties. So some people might be unhappy that we are trying to draft two people from the two main parties that we are so opposed to as a movement. But at the same time, there are already figures that are sort of known on a national level. And so people who sort of align closely with one of those two candidates might be willing to leave their party for the candidate instead of staying in the party for tribalism's sake. Especially for Tulsi's 2020 presidential run, because she had, there were people who supported her and should be willing to still support her, which should really help us get that groundswell that the Libertarian Party would need to give us their ticket.
Yeah, because I think the big thing, because we're specifically talking from the Libertarian perspective here, the Libertarians have been kind of shut out of the political sphere, and I think building this coalition is a way to actually elevate their voices, and I think that's the big selling point that I think people need to push for the specifically third parties, not just Libertarians, but really any third party. Is these two parties are shutting out your voice, and it's not just by accident. They're specifically trying to shut it out. So yeah, it's something that we're providing a platform where that can change, and we can break that. And I think the first thing that has to happen is we have to break that stronghold they have over the conversation. And after it's broken, then we can come in with all these different ideas and have that discussion. But when the parties are actively working against that doesn't, that's what we need to fix first.
Someone shared that Joe Jorgensen just tweeted something about, I think today, about how Donald Trump and Joe Biden are trying to suppress third parties. So I think that's a really promising sign for the Libertarian Party warming up to the Unity2020 idea. I just also have to say, I really hate the idea of wasting your vote if you vote for a third party. That concept doesn't make sense to me. I'm always going to vote for someone instead of against someone. I want to vote for the unity ticket. I want to vote for unity for the country, not for division. I can't understand why anyone would be opposed to that idea.
It's the fear. A lot of people are afraid of the other side, and there's been it's a boogeyman that people have built up of the characters on the other side, and so people are so afraid of that they're like, I can't leave, and I'm pretty sure that's something the parties have specifically tried to build, because that keeps you in the corner of safety with the party. You won't want to leave the party because you're afraid that the boogeyman is going to get you, and so I think bringing together both sides and showing, hey, they're not as scary as you think they are, and bringing that together is a big component of this. And I voted for the Libertarian candidate in the 2016 election, even though I didn't really like Gary Johnson either. He wasn't, but it was. It's my politics, and at the end of the day, if we want better leaders from if you want better Libertarian leaders, you have to vote Libertarian. You can't be afraid of that and afraid of something on the other side, someone on the other side to throw away to not vote for who you really want, the ideas that you really want. I think sometimes
it's a principled vote.
Yeah, I think sometimes we just get caught up too much in the people and not enough in the why am I voting for this. The politician's supposed to represent ideas. They're not supposed to be, you're not supposed to judge them as a person as much as their politics and ideas when you go to vote. I think people too easily get sucked into the, oh, Donald Trump's such a bad person, but most people who are voting for Donald Trump aren't really voting for him because they like how he acts and all that. They're voting for him because he represents the political perspective that they value. And I think we have to get back to that sort of thinking of, hey, what do I value, not what do I fear?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was describing this to Mikey before you jumped on, Akilan, in that, I've talked about this before. I voted for Donald Trump in 2016. And I did so because I think I was stuck in that kind of fear-based groupthink. I grew up in rural Indiana, and I didn't get into politics until my probably late 20s and 30s. And if you stumble into the right path in Indiana, you can be, you're in a Republican echo chamber, and maybe you start listening to Republican radio hosts, and you only tune into Fox News. And if you're on social media, you only follow the right-leaning news sources, right? And it becomes, my team has to beat your team at all costs. And, when it was Hillary Clinton, I can never say her name, I don't know why, Hillary Clinton, it was, the choice was obvious. We had to beat her at all costs. And Trump, people have talked about how he doesn't do these rallies, and the way he pivots on what people say about him. He doesn't do that by accident. And so he gets people organized, and he gets people kind of thinking, all right, yeah, we're gonna do it. We're gonna beat that side. And I think that's kind of, so some of his qualities I did think that I liked, back then. And I think some people did also follow into that and still do. And so I think, and I kind of relate this to preparing for this show. I was looking into, the Libertarian Party and the Green Party specifically. I think I could have listed out basically what the general ideals of the Libertarian Party were before this. Which is, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong, right? It generally represents lack of infringement on the liberties of individuals, and lack of, big government. It's reducing the size of government. What else? What else would you guys throw in there as typical liberal or libertarian ideas or ideals?
The way I see it, it's actually the small government aspect of libertarians is they share a lot of that with conservatives. I think some of the places are homeland security. I think is one thing where I think libertarians believe that conservatives went way too far in kind of spying on American citizens, and that's a big one, big sticking point to why they big reason why someone would identify as libertarian and not conservative. We're talking about that side. Like I said, I grew up starting with in sort of the liberal camp, but I think slowly I came to realize that I'm not a huge fan of that was before I really knew how government worked and much about how successful government can be, and more and more I started to see how the government was really failing its people. I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure we need to be stepping up the amount of government we have. We can't even get it right with the amount we have right now. And that's kind of what drove me over to the libertarian side. And so now generally I believe, and the other thing that I didn't like about liberals is they seem to have just a straight opposition to capitalism. Capitalism kind of becomes this vague driver of inequality, which, it is in some sense, but I think liberals have a tendency to just oppose capitalism in general instead of understanding why it's been so successful and what the real problem, specific problems are. And they tend to sometimes throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's really what pushed me to the libertarian side from the left.
Yeah, I would say I probably came to the libertarian side from the right more so. I definitely come from a right-leaning family. The way I conceptualize libertarianism is it's the American version of English classical liberalism. So it's founded on Enlightenment values of the individual being structuring society around the individual. And again, like what Akilan said, it doesn't necessarily have to be small government, but it's about not infringing on people's rights. It's about trusting each individual to make decisions for themselves because they know what they want better than anyone else does. So that's how you get socially left positions like gay marriage and gender and racial equality, which I think are obvious to anyone that we would want to have a conversation with. But also you get right-leaning economic positions like you should be able to choose who you do business with and for what wage. And that's really giving the individual all of the power in their own life. And I think that's really powerful.
Okay. And the reason I asked that question is for this. So is the Unity 2020 movement, is it maybe a way of not rebranding, but rethinking the Libertarian Party? Because I think maybe there's a reason that we keep saying that Unity 2020 is not a party, right? Because we don't want to brand it and solidify it into these hard and fast ideas or concepts, that we can list on a website to say, well, here are the things we want to do. Here are the things we believe in. Where we're a movement by the American people for the American people. And it'll be more like that. It'll be more like, well, it depends on the issue, and it depends on what the American people think is best.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, once we've drafted candidates and they've accepted, then we can put up the Unity 2020 party platform for that specific election. And then in 2024, we have to start over again and say, now that and pick new candidates or do the switch of the ticket or however we end up doing it in 2024. Yeah. Basically, the idea I'm trying to get at is that you put out your campaign website once you know who the two candidates are. But until that point, this is about a platform. It's not about any sort of specific policy issues. So I don't think of this as a reframing of the Libertarian Party. It's just that Libertarians can find a home in Unity 2020, because I'm sure there are a lot of people supporting Unity 2020 who would not otherwise consider themselves to be Libertarians.
Yeah, I think the big thing in Unity 2020 is kind of changing. I think the main difference between Unity and a traditional party is the way the parties do primaries is that the candidates are all campaigning throughout that cycle. I think what we need to promote in Unity is having conversations during that time. And then when we get closer to the actual election day, then we can start hammering down, specific policy positions or what these candidates are really going to represent. And people can certainly make their decisions about who they want to vote for. Like, even if you're part of the conversation in Unity, we shouldn't be pushing them to vote for the candidates. That's something you have to come to on your own. You may not agree with, which candidates get selected in the end. But I think it's more so that initial point of promoting conversations so that we're elevating capable leaders. Excuse me. We're electing capable leaders in the end. Because if we just have, all these candidates, the problem I think the party runs into is that they already have sort of their positions set up. So when you're running a primary, it's more like all the candidates are either trying to just go more and more to the left or right, or they're trying to attack the other candidates and trying to, push them down because we're all more or less in the same place. And the conversations, instead of having, debates, I think we need to have more conversations so that we really understand what other people think about, the candidate you might support at the time. And maybe that changes your mind. And instead of having all these, fight, it seems like we're throwing people in the ring and having a boxing match and everybody comes out to see it in the debates. But what we really need is just a sit down conversation and long form stuff, not the little sound bites, like minute, or I don't know how long they get in the debates. I don't really watch them, but it's not long, and the candidates have a lot to say, and the timer goes up, and they're trying to get that last bit of information through. And it's like that's not how we have conversations. Like, that's not how you have conversations when you have friends over. Like, you talk for as long as you need to get your point across. And I think that's something that can't be done with the traditional party system. I think that's what you need.
Yeah, I'd say half the time. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, no, I was done.
But it's kind of funny because I was going to say half the time when those debates are going on, somebody is given a question, they start the answer, they're interrupted by the other person, or somebody's given a topic and they don't address the topic. They only start attacking the other person. So I stopped watching them as well. And I can tell you, to your point about long form discussions, that's where I really started to look at Tulsi, was on Joe Rogan's podcast. And I think I saw Dan Crenshaw on there as well. And I think even Dan Crenshaw mentioned how he has great conversations with Tulsi specifically, but he disagrees with her on a lot of things, but they're able to talk to each other. And it was during the Democratic primary where I thought, all right, I need to, again, stay out of my Republican echo chamber, and I need to give every one of these candidates a chance. And when I watched her on that, show, and it was one of his typical length of podcasts, 3 hours long, she wasn't tied to any specific talking points. She wasn't there with a specific agenda. She was there to just talk to him and answer his questions and have a conversation. And you could really see after that where the machine of the DNC really shut her out of the process and the fights that she went on against them. And I was willing to vote Democrat for the first time in my life because of watching that episode. So I agree. We need to sit down and hear the thoughts and opinions of these people. And I think, and I was going to say this, what you were saying about the candidates and hearing their talking points and the things they talk about and their beliefs. Should we first discount anybody that says they want to run? That's been talked about on this show before as well. Like, do we want people that say, I want the job? Or do we want the people where only we can draft them? Because most of the ones that want the job are like the duopoly we have in front of us today. Is that a fair question?
Do you mean from like the more practical perspective of because a lot of times they say they don't want to run, but that's really because they're trying to protect their, like Jesse Ventura. Jesse Ventura kind of made that point pretty clear. He's like, yeah, I want to keep my healthcare and my job, so I'm not ready for. So they usually say that, but I think you're talking more about the willingness to want the job, I guess, in some sense.
I guess, do we want the people that, were willing to jump into the Democratic machine, the people like Kamala Harris, who lifelong, they seem to want to climb the political ladder, right? That seems to be the end game, is to gain more and more power and climb the political ladder. And that also talks about the two candidates we have a little bit, right? To where Tulsi did run for president. Dan, I don't think has expressed willingness to do so. And I think he even expressed that he wouldn't on Brett's Dark Horse or the Campfire episode. But still, that was raised on one of our previous episodes. Do we want people that are really fighting for the job? Or do we want people that are more liable to accept the job if they are kind of nominated through a groundswell effort like Unity2020?
I don't think we can discount anyone from the beginning. Whether you say you want the job or not, I'm going to try and evaluate the same based on our three characteristics: the capable, courageous, patriot. I actually think that saying you want the job might be a good thing if you meet the other categories, because it means you're willing to go and to stand up for your principles, to stand up for the American people, to be willing to compromise, all those things that we need in a good leader. But if we discount someone just because they say that they're interested in the job, we might lose a lot of really valuable candidates.
Yeah, and I don't. Yeah, I agree. The wanting, like, on some level, you have to want the job. Like, you have to want to come in, and I think Yang and Tulsi, for going through the Democratic process, it showed that they're willing to stick their neck out and say, hey, we spoke to people. They want something different than what you're offering, and we're willing to fight for it. I think that's an important characteristic to have. But I think I understand your point in that we don't want people. Yeah, we don't want people who just want to climb the political ladder. But I think that's something that we need to let people evaluate that for themselves. Like, I think it's very obvious to people when you're really authentic about your positions, or you're just trying to climb the political ladder, because it's usually the people who follow the polls that are trying to just climb the political ladder. They don't really have real principles. But if you really have real principles and you really talk about them, like, it shows. And that's the reason Bernie Sanders had a lot of support, is because
I was going to say Bernie.
Yeah, and when I saw him on Joe Rogan, it kind of like took the craziness factor that kind of people attribute to him a little bit out for me. Like, he's still a little eccentric, but I think you could just feel the authenticity in his position. Like, he really cares about it. He really thinks about it. He has real points to make. It's not even that I agree with him, but I can feel it in the way he speaks, and I think a lot of people can see that. I think a lot of people just think they don't have other options, and they really kind of don't, and that's what we're trying to provide here. But yeah, that's. I don't think willingness to run should be a discounting factor. I think people can decide that for themselves.
I totally.
You guys, go ahead, Mikey.
I was going to mention Bernie also. Like, I disagree with him on a lot of positions, but I really respect him for having been consistent for 30 years.
Yeah, I was going to say that you both brought up good points and kind of arguments to that idea. I think it was raised by, I believe it was Dan Jones in one of our previous episodes. We were still in the candidate selection process, and he was talking about Mitch Daniels being his selection from the center right or from the right. And one of the points he made was that he didn't want to run for president. He had been governor of Indiana, but then had all the opportunity in the world to do so, but stepped out of it to basically take care of his family and watch his kids grow up through high school. Mm-hmm. And that was one of his points for saying, well, this is a person that doesn't want it. That's a person we should draft. But I think you both raise valid arguments to that as well, because he may stick to it and say, well, no, I said I didn't want to do this. Why are you asking me? Yeah,
I think that's too complicated of a factor to just say, no, you want to run, so we're either going to discount you or pull you into the conversation. Like, it's not a very clear point to make that decision on.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay, so we are nearing 50 minutes, and we usually wrap up sometime around here. So final thoughts from you guys. Again, we talked a lot about the libertarian values and why people who might vote for Joe Jorgensen might look at Unity2020, why they may not. Do you guys have any final thoughts regarding the discussion today?
Do you want to go ahead?
I'll go ahead. Yeah, I think the big thing right now is just to get that mainstream support for Unity2020, and I think talking to libertarians, that conversation has become much easier for me than initially when starting out with Unity, because honestly initially I didn't really understand what exactly Unity was going to be in the beginning, but as the picture becomes clear of what we really want this movement to be, I I think selling it to libertarians is becoming more and more viable, just because we're showing that. I think the main point is that we can elevate their voice more than they can do on their own. We're building something bigger than just a political platform, and I think that's another thing, is that because we don't really have a one political platform, it's easy for people to come in and join the movement. And so, yeah.
Okay, very good. Mikey?
Something I'd love to see going forward is if we could sit down Dan and Tulsi together and have them talk about specific policy issues that are likely to come up during the 2020 election cycle, and just long form, have the two of them talk about it, share their points, try and realize where they're wrong, and try and get the other person to accept where they're right, and then walk away having reached a compromise that they could go and promote as an actual platform. And the message of this is what good government looks like, and how you can work with the other side would be unbelievably powerful for getting people to say I want that kind of government. I don't want to need to control all three houses of the not all three houses, but all three branches of the federal government to get any policy done. We need people to see how you can actually work with someone else, and Unity2020 has the opportunity to do that even before getting into office, which none of the other candidates have. And that's a powerful tool that we should leverage.
Well said. And maybe we will, maybe we should clip that right there, and we can all share it to Tulsi and Dan Crenshaw and say, from our Unity2020 volunteer base, Mikey Fernandez, here you go. Your open invitation for discussion.
I'm sure I'm not the only one, though.
Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off there.
Oh, I was going to say, I'm sure I'm not the only one who would say the same thing.
Yeah, I've been having conversations with people, and we brought that up too. It's sort of like a dry run. It's something that I think you bring up a good point, that it's something that we have that nobody else has, and we should be definitely promoting it.
Okay, well said. Well, Mikey and Akilan, thank you both for joining me today. I really appreciate the conversation, and you two, just like we've had on every other episode, have displayed, an ability throughout the Unity2020 volunteer base to have, truthful conversations with anyone about these important topics. And again, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for hosting.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. So that's it for us. Be sure to subscribe to our Unity Now podcast page on YouTube. Hit the notification bell as well. And go to articlesofunity.org for more information. And I will say that the Articles of Unity Twitter handle, as of today, is still suspended by Twitter. So get the word out to Twitter and Jack to free Articles of Unity on Twitter. And visit us on the Unity Now Twitter page and Facebook page. And from there, we will see you next time. Thank you.